NVIDIA shareholders, you better get ready for this. After hours today, we have NVIDIA coming out with earnings. And even though NVIDIA earnings are usually by default a monumental event in the stock market, this is extra spicy. This is extra special. Now, NVIDIA has been on the downward pattern for the past few days. It's down 7% over the past few days, as well as Peter Thiel dumping his entire NVIDIA position, which was disclosed a few days ago. We have the overall market basically being on a downward spiral. The NASDAQ is down almost 5% over the past 5 days, and we are on 12. Yes, 12 on the fear and greed index, basically in extreme fear. And there's lots and lots of bubble talk in the stock market. The AI bubble is popping, everybody's anxious, and either you are thinking that this might be the salvage of the century with NVIDIA coming out saving the entire market, or this may be the one event, the one catalyst, the spark that ignites the whole fire and ends the AI bubble. Now, whatever the case may be, I don't want you to smash nothing. I don't want you to buy nothing. I don't want you to click nothing. I just want you to listen and pay attention. In this video, we're not going to be doing any speculating, any hunch, any gut feelings. We'll be using data and objective facts to give you, number one, a full preview of NVIDIA earnings and what to look for in the earnings, the important stuff, not the usual bullshit you can get in mainstream media. Number two, we'll talk about NVIDIA's strategy for the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, including what happened with Peter Thiel selling out of NVIDIA, how it impacts the whole strategy around NVIDIA. And of course, we will talk about the overall market. I'll say a few words about the so-called AI bubble. So let's get started. So yes, Peter Thiel, one of the world's most prolific investors of all time, sold his entire NVIDIA stake, and it was disclosed a few days ago. Now, I don't worship anybody, and I don't think anybody wants to be worshipped if they're in the right mind, but Peter Thiel has a lot of street cred in the stock market. He has a lot of clout, and every time he does something, it matters. He's not some random YouTuber making moves in the stock market, okay? That doesn't mean you have to start panicking. That doesn't mean that you have to start running for the hills. It only means it's okay to listen, to think about it, analyze, and make your own decision at the end of the day. Now, if we're talking about the NVIDIA future, there's a lot of different elements that go into that. And if we look at the whole thing holistically as some sort of a weather forecast, well, you know, Peter Thiel selling out is the direction of the wind, but there's like 15 more other things going on. Not the entire forecast is Peter Thiel. Now, look, he didn't just trim. I understand that, right? If Peter Thiel would have sold 10%, 20%, we would not even having this conversation. Most likely, this would have been a fart in the wind. But he did liquidate 100% of NVIDIA and 75% of Tesla. This is a huge event. Now, I wouldn't ignore that, no by any stretch of the imagination, but I would just use it to look at my own game plan and kind of review my position and my standings, which means that I would first ask myself a question: why did Peter Thiel sell NVIDIA? Why did he heavily trim Tesla? Is it because he thinks AI is overvalued? Is it because he's reallocating capital for other things he needs? Is it because he needs liquidity? There's a lot of reasons to sell a stock, but only one reason to buy one. So when people buy stocks, it's only for one reason. But when they sell stocks, it may be 1,000 different parameters here that we're not aware of. And let's take that into consideration. Now, of course, you don't want to panic. You want to be strategic. And the best way to be strategic is actually look at this way, right? If you thought that NVIDIA and Tesla were great stocks ahead of the Peter Thiel sale, him selling on its own should not change your position. The fact that somebody doesn't like the stock shouldn't bear any sort of weight on your decision whether to own the stock or not, okay? Now, here's the thing. If you actually look at what Peter Thiel said about NVIDIA and the entire AI market in general since 2024 until now for the past 2 years, you're going to find out he's not really a fan. He hasn't been a huge fan of NVIDIA or the AI market in general. In February this year, when he did the whole all-in podcast convention and he was basically talking about NVIDIA, he said he doesn't believe in the whole AI crap. He thinks that everybody except NVIDIA is losing money and that he thinks it's very, very similar to 1999. He basically, in February, which was almost a year ago, said, look, guys, I'm not a huge believer in this whole AI hoopla.
You need to pay attention to who's making money. It's NVIDIA. It's the hardware, the chips layer.
Are they making 120% of the profits?
I think everybody else is losing money collectively. Yeah, everyone else is just spending money on the computer. So it's one company that's making. I mean, maybe there's a few other people that are making some money. I mean, I assume TSMC and ASML, but yeah, I think everyone else is collectively losing money.
And of course, listening to Peter Thiel in his own words, it's quite clear he's never been a huge believer in this, right? He has made money on it and made quite a lot of money on it, but he's not a huge bull, which means he's going to get out and de-risk before it pops, in his opinion. Now, him selling, is that a red signal? Is that a red flag? Possibly. But is it an automatic sign for you to sell your NVIDIA holdings? Hell no. This is not how investing works. If you're just blindly going to follow somebody, Peter Thiel might be the guy, of course, I'd give him that. But I don't think anybody in their right mind should be automatically following somebody else's example. Now, operating cash flow for NVIDIA is up 7,000% of the past 10 years. In fact, of the past 3 years, it's up 920%. Of the past 12 months, it's up 60%. So this company is growing operating cash flow by 60% a year even now. If you look at revenue is up 500% over the past 3 years. It's up 71% from last year. And they have $5.5 billion of cash versus only $1 of debt, which means they have 5.5 times cash versus debt. And they have 60% operating margin, $60 billion almost in cash, a forward PE of 45 to 50, depends who you ask. And they're trading at 22 times sales. None of this screams publish overvalued insanity. Now, of course, if you look at Stock MVP and you go to the Insiders tab, you're going to find out an alarming stat, which is that insiders for the past 6 months have been selling heavy and not buying almost none. Over the past 6 months, we have 8 million shares sold by insiders and only 21,000 shares bought by same insiders. So there is heavy selling activity on the stock from insiders, as you can see on Stock MVP. So despite all this insane great fundamentals, people from inside are selling out, and this is something you have to be aware of. You can't just ignore and say, well, that's not happening. It is happening. And along with Peter Thiel selling, that is also going into your red flag column. If you're making a column for good, the fundamentals are great. If you're making a column for bad, Peter Thiel selling, insider selling, that's definitely bad. Now, I think that the whole discussion here is a little bit wrong and a little bit off. And let me explain. I think that focusing on fundamentals vis-a-vis NVIDIA is the wrong thing to do here, because fundamentals are great. There is no discussion that NVIDIA has wonderful margins, wonderful growth. Everything is great. But the real question with NVIDIA isn't the current fundamentals. It's what's going to be the situation in 5 to 10 years as far as AI, as far as artificial intelligence, as far as data centers. How much more scaling as far as spending money on NVIDIA chips will the hyperscalers do over the next 10 years? How much more competitors will get into the market and disrupt NVIDIA? All of these questions have to be answered even before you look at any single metric on the fundamentals, because this is going to determine NVIDIA's future, not the current operating margin. How much competition and how much demand? These are the key questions that basically keep people outside of NVIDIA right now. Now, there is, of course, the Cisco case from late 90s, where Cisco had a similar spike to NVIDIA, being that in the late 90s, the company ballooned outside of its normal size because people assumed that the telecom internet deployment cycle will continue forever, and yet it ended. And then Cisco, even though it kept on making money, shrunk back on the stock price because there were a lot of assumptions baked in that didn't materialize. People are afraid that this might happen to NVIDIA. I personally don't hold that opinion because there's clearly a difference between the telecom life cycle of a product and the capex and infrastructure versus high-end computing. High-end computing keeps evolving, keeps changing. The capex cycles get ramped up again and again, and they get renewed again and again. Just think about it like a personal computer, right? Whenever you buy a personal computer every 2 years, it's absolutely obsolete. With telecom, your telephone can probably be there for the next 20 years and still do the job. Of course, talking about the landline, not the iPhones we buy every 3 years. Again, another question, do we really need a new iPhone every 3 years? But, getting completely sidetracked here. I think that the capex cycle for data centers, for AI, isn't going to end up anytime soon. And I think that the doom and gloom around that with NVIDIA is a little bit overblown. I think that NVIDIA is dependent on the AI cycle for sure. The big question here isn't so much NVIDIA, but more AI. Will AI keep evolving? Or is this the kind of max capacity of AI we have? And from this point on, we basically just kind of stagnating, right? Looking at what AI is doing, moving into retail, into logistics, healthcare, hospitality, the food industry, AI is moving into industries, into insurance, banking. We only seeing massive, huge leaps from AI. I don't think we're anywhere close to the end of the AI development cycle, which means that if AI is getting bigger and smarter and better, more data centers with more powerful GPUs will be needed, which means NVIDIA is going to continue to make money. Even if you split the market 50-50, assuming AMD takes half the market, which is a stretch, NVIDIA still makes more than enough money in the next 10 years to justify the current price tag. Now, that doesn't mean I would buy NVIDIA at any price. That's certainly not the case. I'll talk about that in a second. There is a strategy to buy NVIDIA over the long haul if you're a believer without overpaying, but that's towards the end of the video. Right now, I want to talk about the earnings. I think the earnings today will help clarify a lot of this. They will make you a lot smarter if you pay attention to the right things. Everybody will be focused on EPS and revenue growth, but what you should be focusing on is, number one, is demand for GPUs slowing down? Is there still massive backlog for the next 2 to 3 years? NVIDIA has to talk about it in these earnings. What are the big hyperscalers going to do in 2026 and 2027? Are they continuing to spend the same amount of money? What happens to the margins? Are the margins eroding? That shows the slowdown. Is AMD moving in? Look for Jensen to talk about what happens with AMD competition. Do we have solutions for the power constraint to power all these huge data centers? We were talking about that for the past few months. That's a huge problem for the data center industry. Do we have a bubble in AI or not, as it comes from Jensen? Jensen has to come out and say, look, we're not in a bubble because of A, B, C, D, E. He has to address this. He can't just ignore the bubble talk. And of course, he has to raise guidance. If Jensen isn't out there raising guidance, saying, hey, we're going to do better than ever, that's another red flag to put in your red flag column. Now, we've been talking about NVIDIA since October of 2020. In fact, October 26th of 2020. The stock was 1,200% cheaper than it is right now. Same as Palantir, 1,500% cheaper than it is right now. We actually added a few stocks this year. We added Vertiv, which is a cooling solution for data centers. Back in June of this year, it's up 53%. We added CEG, which is an energy solution. Just in March this year, it's up 62%. We've been on this in my community, in my academy, for months and months and months, talking about the data center business, NVIDIA, and all the picks and shovel businesses that will benefit from it. And if you want to get better at this, I suggest you join the academy, patreon.com/Tom Nash. We will teach you how to look at this correctly, how to spot opportunities early, and how not to get caught up in the FOMO with everybody else when it's already too late to go crazy. Now, right now, the situation is clear. NVIDIA has flown up a lot. The stock price is very high. Maybe it's cheap, maybe it's not cheap, depends on what the future brings. The one thing I can tell you, if you actually use a strategy that involves long-term patient investing, and if NVIDIA doesn't screw it up on the way, basically, if competition doesn't take their lunch, and if the AI cycle continues, which I think on both cases they'll be fine, a slow, calculated dollar cost averaging approach, which basically allows you to buy at all times slowly, but to increase your buys when the stock price actually drops over short-term panic, is going to get you to the promised land, just like we did over the past 5 years with NVIDIA, Palantir, and a whole bunch of other companies. There will be red days, there will be panic. You have to learn how to use this through slow buying at all times and expedited buying during crisis and panic. If you want to learn more about this, I said, join the academy, Roik Academy, patreon.com/Tom Nash. Would love to teach you, would love to get you in our 25,000 member academy to get you in the right mindset, get you off the hamster wheel, no stock picks, none of this trash, actual real long-term investing that brings results. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.